follow the guidelines and behave in a manner that is respectful to one another. If you have a comment to make on any of the items, please raise your hand and I will certainly recognize you. You'll be given 5 minutes. And if you would, when you approach the bench, please, or the podium, please state your name, address, and if you're a city resident or not. And we'll give you 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when 30 seconds before that, so you'll be able to wind up your thoughts on it. We appreciate that and being respectful to council members and this body. And with that, I will recognize our Mayor Pro Tem, Councilman Ebner, for additions and deletions to the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any additions or changes from the council members?
Yes, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I would like to add an item probably in the information section
Sure.
of our agenda to discuss the possibility of placing the Renaissance on either the primary or general ballot. And I think we have some information on the mechanics of doing that on either one.
Okay, we'll put that under issues and updates.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. City Attorney, you have that?
Yes.
All right. Adding that to the agenda, Mr. Mayor, I so move to accept the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second, to accept the agenda as modified.
Okay, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Minutes were distributed to council before the meetings for their review. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as written?
I so move.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, thank you. Moving down to number 1 under old business, this is approval of appointments and discussion of appointees to various city boards, commissions, and committees. Turn to City Manager John Clem for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our council has 10 pending appointments to fill vacancies on different city boards, commissions, and committees. 5 appointments are presented for council's consideration and vote at the meeting tonight. Councilman Merry has recommended the appointment of Pat Andringa to the Arts Commission to fill the position of Linda Purdy, who has resigned. If appointed, Ms. Andringa's term would expire April 11, 2018. He also nominated Bob Brookshire to serve on the Energy and Environmental Committee to fill the position of Andrew Hallen, who has resigned. If appointed, Mr. Brookshire's term would expire December 31, 2018. Mayor Osborne has recommended the reappointment of Hank Mormon to the Building Codes Appeals Committee with the term to expire May 12, 2018. He has also recommended the reappointment of Doris Begley to the Arts Commission with the term to expire April 11, 2019. Mayor Osborne has also recommended the reappointment of McDonald Law to the Design Review Board with the term to expire December 31, 2018. For council consideration is the appointment of Pat Andringa to the Arts Commission and Bob Brookshire to the Energy and Environmental Committee, and the reappointment of Hank Mormon to the Building Codes Appeals Committee, Doris Begley to the Arts Commission, and McDonald Law to the Design Review Board.
Is there a motion to?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion, a second. A second, all those in favor?
I will point out the city clerk is very happy. It's never been this low in the 10 years I've been on council, so.
Very good, and that's unanimous.
Here, here.
Okay, are there any names to be moved for consideration at our next meeting?
Yes, I'd like to appoint Tim Redd to the Building Code of Appeals.
Okay. Any others? I have a vacancy coming open on the Energy and Environmental. David Falk has served in that slot. First of all, I want to commend him and thank him for his service to our city. And I'd like to put the name Steve King, not the author, for Energy and Environmental Committee for consideration at our next meeting. Any others? All right, thank you. Moving down old business. Number 2, this is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to approve the sale of 1147 Cornish Street Northeast. By title, an ordinance approving the sale of 1147 Cornish Street in Crosland Park subdivision. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Okay, we have a motion, Ms. Diggs. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Dewar. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, we have an offer to purchase 1147 Cornish Street Northeast in Crosland Park for $57,500 as an owner-occupied resident. The offer is for the purchase of the property for $57,500 or appraised value. The buyer is asking for additional considerations as shown in the attached memo from Ms. Emery Langston. Staff is recommending that we proceed with the sale of 1147 Cornish Street Northeast. City Council approved the ordinance on first reading at the June 12, 2017 meeting. For City Council consideration, a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to sell 1147 Cornish Street Northeast in Crosland Park to Ashley Garrett for $57,500 or appraised value.
Any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
I have one kind of general question, and I don't know if there's anybody here that can really answer it, but as we've sold these things, I've seen the values, the numbers progressively go down, and I just worry that in our eagerness to make these sales and get good people in there, if we might be undermining, these sales might be undermining values of other homes in the neighborhood. I don't know if it is or it, and as I see these steadily kind of tick downward, it's just a concern.
I'm going to ask, is Emery Langston, if she would? Good evening, Emery.
And I would just like to add, Mr. Mayor, as Emery approaches the podium, that these have been on the market for years.
Yes, I know that.
And so we're not acting precipitously. As a matter of fact, our direction from council was to actually lower the price our greater concern is that they are left unoccupied with the possibility of damage to the property. And so I just wanted to add those comments. Emery?
And we are seeing the past several properties that have sold, the appraised value is coming in right around this.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Kind of sometimes the tail wags the dog.
And I will share this story. We sold some properties on Alderman about a year and a half ago. And at a neighborhood meeting, I was talking to a neighborhood resident who is a homeowner on Alderman. She refinanced her house. And she shared with me that she was very, very happy at what she was able to get with her refinancing because of the sales of the homes.
Okay.
So she was pleased.
Good. Well, I mean, I think it's good that we're getting them sold and we're sticking to the rule of having owner occupied and kind of screening those folks. I just wonder, how low it will go.
Well, Philip, I think we have to consider some of those factors we were discussing in the work session as well. But also our goal is to make home ownership reality for those who desire to be homeowners. So, like
Somebody that
the
we
mayor
sold,
said, they've been on the market for a while.
what the impetus of my question was, somebody we sold one of these houses to for $72,000 2 years ago now sees a house that might be in a lot of ways similar going for $57,000.
Still a lot of factors that's...
Yeah, I understand, and I think it's to get owner-occupied folks in there that are good, worthy folks for it is a great purpose. I just wanted to express that concern.
Very good. Thank you, Emery. Are all those in favor of second reading? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Number 3 under old business, this is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to transfer 3 lots in Crosland Park to Second Baptist Community Development Corporation. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Price and Mr. Homoki made the second. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, the Second Baptist Community Development Corporation has expressed an interest in acquiring 3 additional city-owned properties in Crosland Park. The properties are 864 Alfred, 746 Schroeder, and 675 Aldridge Street. Staff is recommending that the city transfer these properties to Second Baptist CDC. The Second Baptist has been a longtime partner of the city in the Northside revitalization and has a proven track record with other housing partners in working to develop and provide affordable and workforce housing. City Council approved this ordinance on first reading at the June 12, 2017 meeting. For City Council consideration is second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to transfer 3 lots in Crosland Park to Second Baptist Community Development Corporation.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council? All those in favor of this on second reading? And that's unanimous. Councilman Ebner, what does that bring us down to, number of properties now?
Down, have we transferred the others to the city? If we have, it's 0, isn't it? Besides the 4 houses? Why don't you give us an update, you or Ms. Langston, please, Stuart?
Other than the homes that are listed for sale by the realtors, we have 4 properties, but it's the 2 pocket parks which lead to the schools, the community garden, and the community building. So that's it.
All right, will those get transferred to our general account before the 30th of this month?
That's what the schedule is, yes.
Ms.
Very good.
Kim is shaking her head because we've been working on that for a while. So that'll put us down to 4 properties for sale.
Very good.
Let me just take this, make this personal note to thank Councilmember Ebner for moving this process along. You have been very committed to this, and thank you for your work there following
Thank
this.
you. I think working with Second Baptist, there's no question it's going to work as an improvement to the neighborhood.
I agree.
Very good. Thank you. Moving down the agenda under old business, number 4. This is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to amend the old Aiken design guidelines for large footprint buildings by title and ordinance amending the old Aiken design guidelines regarding large footprint buildings. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Councilman Diggs made a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
All right. Councilman Mary, appreciate that. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, on March 7, 2017, the Design Review Board voted to recommend a new section be included in the old Aiken design guidelines for large footprint buildings. The proposed amendment clarifies how existing design guidelines would be reviewed for larger structures. Any amendments to the design guidelines are recommended by the Design Review Board to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission holds a public hearing and makes a recommendation to City Council. The Planning Commission at their May 9, 2017 meeting voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the proposed amendments to City Council. City Council approved this ordinance on first reading at the June 12, 2017 meeting. For City Council consideration is second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to amend the old Aiken design guidelines for large footprint buildings.
Thank you, sir. Comments from the audience? Comments from council? Okay, all those in favor on second reading? Unanimous. Thank you. Moving down old business, number 5, this is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to amend the concept plan for the ridge at Chucker Creek. By title and ordinance amending the concept plan for the ridge at Chucker Creek. There you go. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Ebner. Councilman Diggs, thank you for the second. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, the Planning Commission at their May 9, 2017 meeting considered a request for amendment of the concept plan for the ridge at Chucker Creek. Randy Walcott, the applicant, is requesting a change of use for the 5.80-acre Outlot B to a private commercial stable with residence. This lot is designated as required open space in the original concept plan. The original intent of Outlot B was to house stables and to provide equestrian facilities for the residents of the ridge at Chucker Creek. In 2011, Outlot B, along with 12 additional outlots, were removed from the declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the ridge at Chucker Creek and returned to the control of the developer. Currently, the site is developed with stables and paddocks. Under the current approved concept plan, a caretaker residence is permitted, and there is an apartment within the barn. The applicant is proposing to sell the existing stables and pasture to a private owner for use as a commercial equestrian facility and owner-caretaker residence. The commercial use would remain as a component of the planned residential zoning district. The developer proposed to sell Outlot B to an individual to be used as a horse boarding and training facility. The purchasers plan to board school horses on site and offer riding lessons across multiple equine disciplines with an emphasis on entry-level riders and the promotion and fostering of horsemanship based on the principles adopted by the Pony Club. The Planning Commission reviewed the request and voted 5-0 to recommend approval of this application to the City Council with the following conditions as stated in the agenda package. Attached also is a memo from our Planning Director, Ryan Bland, noting that the applicant has provided documentation in response to the proposed Condition 2 regarding stormwater management for the proposed concept plan amendment. In light of this documentation and in consultation with our city attorney, staff recommends that Condition 2 regarding submitting of a stormwater management plan for the concept plan amendment be removed from consideration as part of the application. City Council approved this amended ordinance deleting Condition 2 recommended by the Planning Commission on first reading at the June 12, 2017 meeting. For City Council consideration, a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance for approval of an amendment to the concept plan for the Ridge at Chucker Creek for Outlot B for a private commercial stable with residents with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission and the removal of Condition 2 as requested by the applicant, recommended by staff, and approved by the City Council on first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council? All those in favor on second reading? And that passes unanimously. Moving down to number 6 on our agenda. This is second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to provide for the issuance and sale of water and sewer system revenue bonds of the City of Aiken by title, a master bond ordinance to provide for the issuance and sale of water and sewer system revenue bonds of the City of Aiken, South Carolina, and other matters relating thereto. Is there a motion?
We approve this amount of money of $4,050,000.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilman Ebner. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, as you know, we have two items before you dealing with the issue of financing for repair and maintenance of our infrastructure. You very clearly have stated on numerous occasions that infrastructure repair and maintenance is this council's #1 priority. So tonight we are presenting a master bond ordinance for issuing water and sewer system revenue bonds. This ordinance would be in the governing document under which the city will issue bonds to pay for capital improvements for our water and sewer system. We currently have no debt pledged against our water and sewer system, and the ultimate issue of revenue bonds paid for with fees collected from our customers will be used to make capital improvements to our system. This master bond ordinance will allow us to come back to council in the future to issue bonds at a later date through a separate ordinance. We currently plan to come back to council and request the borrowing of $4,050,000 to make improvements to our water and sewer system, as we discussed at multiple workshops over the last several months. City Council approved this ordinance on first reading at the June 12, 2017 meeting. For City Council approval is second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to provide for the issuance and sale of water and sewer system revenue bonds of the City of Aiken and other matters related thereto. And Mr. Mayor, as you know, we have present this evening Attorney Gary Pope, who has a great deal of expertise and is advising the city on these matters.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments or questions from council? All right. All those in favor on second reading? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down the agenda to number 7. This is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to provide for the issuance and sale of stormwater system revenue bonds of the City of Aiken, a master bond ordinance by title, a master bond ordinance to provide for the issuance and sale of stormwater system revenue bonds of the City of Aiken, South Carolina, and other matters related therereto. Is there a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve the sale of our stormwater systems revenue bonds to borrow $2,504,500 for stormwater system.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Diggs. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, just as we just did for water and sewer, this is the master bond ordinance for stormwater. It is our plan to come back in the future to ask or to make a request to borrow $2,504,500 to make improvements to our stormwater system, as we've discussed at multiple workshops over the last several months. The City Council approved this ordinance in first reading on the June 12, 2017 meeting. For City Council approval, a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance to provide for the issuance and sale of stormwater system revenue bonds of the City of Aiken and other matters relating thereto.
Thank you. Any comments from the audience? Okay. Comments, questions from council? All those in favor on second reading? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down old business to number 8, this is a second reading and public hearing of an ordinance authorizing the financing of the new public safety building on Beaufort Street through an installment purchase contract. By title, an ordinance authorizing the City of Aiken, South Carolina to enter into an installment purchase transaction to finance the costs relating to the acquisition and equipping of a public safety facility, authorizing the execution and delivery of various documents relating to such transaction, including the base lease agreement and the installment purchase and use agreement, approving the use of certain money of the city, approving the issuance of bonds by the City of Aiken Public Facilities Corporation, delegating authority to the mayor and city manager to effect such transaction and determine certain matters and other matters related thereto. Is there a motion?
I so move.
All right, Councilwoman Diggs. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, sir. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, as you know, we're considering the purchase of 834 Beaufort Street Northeast for the relocation of the public safety headquarters. A portion of the cost will obviously need to be financed. One financing option is through the entering into an installment purchase contract. This type of financing allows the city to finance a project through annual installment payments, which are subject to annual appropriation by the City Council. We are planning to make annual payments through the Transportation and Public Safety Improvement Account, which is funded through a portion of our electric utility franchise fees. Another advantage to this method of financing is that it would preserve the city's capacity to issue general obligation bonds should the council want to borrow for other purposes in the future. There are several components of this ordinance, and we went through them in detail in our variety of workshops. As we mentioned at first reading, since 2010, this installment purchase transaction method has been used by a number of municipalities in South Carolina for numerous public purposes, including the City of Charleston, the City of Greenville, the Town of Moncks Corner, the City of North Augusta, the City of North Charleston, to mention a few. City Council approved this ordinance on first reading at the June 19, 2017 special meeting of the City Council. For City Council approval, a second reading of an ordinance authorizing the City of Aiken, South Carolina, to enter into an installment purchase transaction to finance the costs relating to the acquisition and equipping of a public safety facility, authorizing the execution and delivery of various documents relating to such transaction, including the base lease agreement, approving the use of certain money of the city, approving the issuance of bonds by the City of Aiken Public Facilities Corporation, delegating authority to the mayor and city manager to effect such transaction, and determine certain matters and other matters relative thereto. And as I mentioned before, present this evening is Attorney Gary Pope, who has worked on this project with us to answer any additional specific questions that you have about the installment purchase contract. And before I end, Mr. Mayor, I would be remiss if I did not recognize and thank our development partners, Southeastern Development, that have worked very closely with us, and most of all, Chief Barranco and the men and women of our department. It was quite some time ago that we received in hand a consultant's report that suggested that our only option for a renovated, revitalized facility was to knock down the existing building and to build a new building. We know that if we had employed that strategy, we would not have been able to do it for another 3 to 5 years at a cost that would mean the expenditure of millions more in tax dollars. When we received that report, recognizing the fact that it was not really financially feasible, we all rolled up our sleeves, including the chief and the men and women of the department, and we strategized and came up with an alternative strategy that I think will serve this community for the next 30 or 40 years well. An alternative strategy that saves more than $10 million in actual costs to the option that we had originally envisioned. I know Kim Abney, our finance director, is here, and I know that she's prepared a document. I don't know if it's been passed out yet, but it is a document that shows the total costs of this alternative compared to the original costs of building a new facility at the existing site, and you'll see the huge cost savings to our taxpayers. So I thank the chief and the men and women of our department. They have been a really important part of all of this in articulating what their present and future needs are. We're buying a site that has over 11 acres that would allow for expansion in the distant future. And I think that if there ever was a win-win-win for everyone, including the men and women of our department, our city staff, our citizens, and our taxpayers, I think this is it. And so the chief is here to answer any additional questions that you might have about this facility. Attorney Pope is here to explain or to answer any questions that you might have on this financing mechanism. Our development team is represented if you have any questions for them as well.
Thank you. Chief, would you like to make a few comments? Or Kim, actually, I'm sorry, I apologize.
I'm not sure. Can I
Sure.
go first?
No,
Just what I
absolutely.
handed out, I don't want to take credit for that. That does come from First Tryon, our financial advisors. And of course, you can see on the far right-hand bottom corner what the estimated savings, and that's just estimated based on the assumptions on the sheet. So just
And is there any way we could get this up so our audience could see these numbers as well? Stuart, can you?
Stuart, give it to Stuart. While he's doing that, Mr. Mayor, the bonds for this are 30-year, 20-year period.
I don't think that's been determined at this point.
Okay, so they're still open?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Thank you for that.
We'd had a discussion earlier in the week about that. Thank you.
Okay.
Is the
Two different
estimated
scenarios
cost,
shown here.
is the estimated cost, Mr. Mayor, 10,800,000?
Yes.
Can we have the minutes reflect that for
Yep.
future view of others?
I think it's not to exceed tonight.
I don't know if we're going to be able to read it.
10,800,000.
Yes.
Yeah, it was in the last time's agenda. And if you dig through this 180 pages, it's in there too.
It is, it's not, I wanted our minutes to reflect it, though.
Yeah, it was in the last meeting, and I don't
Right.
know. It's down in here
Stuart,
somewhere.
that's probably not going to focus.
For the second reading.
Could we put this somewhere on our webpage?
Yes.
So I want everyone to have an opportunity to look at that, and I'm sorry, that's not, Chief, come on up if you would. Good evening to you.
Mr. Mayor, Council, City Manager, I'd just like to say, actually, even late this afternoon, the men and women were working hard to work with our consultant, Mr. Costner, and planning a path forward with this building. The support by council, our city management has been overwhelming, and we really appreciate that. The need for the facility would only take just a minute walking through, and there's really a lot of excitement at Public Safety looking at the ways to better serve our community through this facility. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Well, we're excited for you.
I would be remiss, and I know he won't like me doing this, but special thanks to our city manager, John Clem, and his guidance and how this project has developed and being financed. So thank you.
I would echo that, as well as a thanks to you, Chief, and your staff. It's been a good project through. Any other comments from the audience? Any comments from council? All those in favor on second reading? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to new business. For consideration, this is number one, is first reading of an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance regarding temporary storage containers. By title, same, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance regarding commercial storage containers. And is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Ebner. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, since the zoning ordinance regarding temporary storage containers was modified in June of 2013, the Board of Zoning Appeals has issued multiple variances to Section 4.3.3C, particularly with regard to the length of time for seasonal use of temporary storage containers. The time frame covered by the variance extended the applicable time frame from as early as September 27th to as late as January 31st. These variances pose a legal concern regarding the ability to enforce the November 1st to December 31st time frame for temporary storage containers. The applicant's rationale for needing the variance from the time frame in the zoning ordinance for temporary storage containers is the seasonal demand of layaway and logistics of procuring these containers. At the October 2016 meeting, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the board forwarded a request to the Planning Commission to review and consider an amendment to the portion of the zoning ordinance that addresses temporary outdoor storage. The Planning Commission, at their regular meeting on June 13th, considered the request of the Board of Zoning Appeals that Section 4.3.3C of the zoning ordinance regarding temporary storage containers be amended. The Planning Commission voted 6-1 to recommend approval of proposed amendments to Section 4.3.3C of the zoning ordinance regarding outdoor storage temporary. The proposed amendments would address the use of temporary storage containers on a seasonal basis in two phases. An early phase from September 1st to October 31st would conditionally allow for containers based on the physical size of the business, and two, a second phase from November 1st to January 15th at the discretion of the planning director and the director of public safety based on the suitability of the site. For City Council consideration on first reading is an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance regarding temporary outdoor storage containers.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council? All those in favor of first reading? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to new business number 2. This is first reading of an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of the city code regarding mobile food vendors. By title, an ordinance amending the Aiken City Code and the zoning ordinance regarding mobile food vending. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilman Ebner. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, at the meeting on June 13, 2017, the Planning Commission discussed potential revisions to the city's mobile food vendor ordinance and unanimously recommended approval of the revision of the mobile food ordinance. The proposed ordinance is primarily an effort to codify the current interpretation of the mobile food vending ordinance, allowing operation on private property with property owner's permission, and with additional provisions to preserve the community health, safety, and welfare. The proposed ordinance allows a method for creating mobile food vendor locations other than those on private property through Planning Commission recommendation and City Council approval. For City Council consideration is first reading of an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance and city code to provide regulations for a mobile food ordinance. And I would like to add, Mr. Mayor, that our planning director and members of the Planning Commission, I believe, are here this evening. But we also have the proposer's prime sponsor, Ms. Jane Page Thompson, here. I don't know whether she would like to make comments, but we thank her both for her leadership and her patience as we work through this process, and we wanted to give her an opportunity to speak.
James Page, good evening.
Good evening. Jane Page Thompson, 240 Knox Avenue. I am a resident of the city.
And before she even starts the clock on you, can I just say this, take a moment of privilege and say congratulations, and for those of you who don't know, this is the Aiken Rotary Club Rotarian of the Year, well deserved. So, awarded today and most deserving.
Thanks for that. City Manager Clem made a reference for the patients. I wanted to just remind council that back on August 9th of last year, I sent a formal request to the city to look at our food truck ordinance and sent a sample draft of an ordinance. I sent all of you all on council back on January the 24th of this year a request to have this issue brought forward. You sent it to Planning Commission. I thank Planning Commission for their work, and thank you all for getting it on your agenda so quickly tonight. This is something that's been a long time coming, and it might be a little ahead of schedule for some people's comfort, but I think for some businesses, it's important that it's on here. I would like to note to you all that the one reason I asked for this is not in the ordinance, and we'll work on that. But because my ice cream truck request is not in here, I am asking you that you amend the authorizing department to include not only planning but also public safety, because, for example, if the planning director is out of town or there's something going on with the planning director, it'd be great to be able to have public safety be able to issue the permit to allow a food truck to park somewhere for an event if it needs to. That's my only request. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane Page. Any other comments from the audience? Good evening, Katie.
My name's Katie Lovespan, I live in Sherwood Place. I actually worked with the Planning Commission on this ordinance, and we talked about a few things, but there's a couple of things I just want to bring up for consideration. It was fun working on it. Did a lot of research, but one thing I just want to make y'all aware of is that push carts, I was surprised that we really can't have them on public streets because of the Department of Transportation right-of-way issue. So, I mean, there's really nothing you can do about it, but it's something that we sort of wished was in the ordinance. There's a couple little things in here that are nitpicky, like selling anything else from the mobile food truck, what kind of signs they can put out and stuff, which we can let ride. But number 4, under item B, alcohol sales are prohibited. This weekend, I didn't think about it at the Planning Commission meeting, but this weekend I was at an event where there was a mobile vendor and he was selling beer. He had all the papers. He had gone to Columbia to get the Department of Revenue papers so that he could do it. And I just looked at it and I said, I think this ordinance might prevent that. So that's something that we have been allowed to do that we might be taking away. I don't know if it's an issue or not. It was just something I observed this weekend. And there was one other thing. Oh, the hours of operation. That's where I've gotten the most comments from people that knew that we were working on it. I don't really have a recommendation other than a lot of people, there's really only one place after 10 o'clock and midnight in Aiken that you can go to eat, and that's Waffle House. So I don't know if this food trucks could fill that need if those hours weren't so restrictive, or if we even need to have the hours. It's just something to consider.
Katie, did any other restaurants maybe expressed a little discontent by possibly thinking that will be taken away from their food sales?
I think the chamber had a meeting with the restaurants. I don't know what came out of it or anything, but the people that I've talked to, there were a few that were a little iffy about it, but I think they came around. But I talked to Cliff at a Pizza de Napoli the other day, and he said, Katie, a food truck can park right there. My food stands on its own.
I like
So,
that. I like
I mean, I
that.
think that's been the attitude of most people.
Any idea of where these will be situated? Will they only be downtown during special events, or will they
Well, I
have a
also talked to
specific site?
Derek Herron, who's planning the Trucks and Tunes event for the Aiken Young Professionals today. And he said they're trying to really have trucks, and they can't find them. I mean, there's just very few of them that are actual trucks. They're mostly food trailers. I'm never going to have a food truck, but I am in a food desert down on Park with 11 hairdresser locations and all, and at lunch, we're hungry. But we don't have time to come
Right.
up to Lawrence Street, park, go in, sit down, and eat. I've been begging for bicycle girls to deliver meals down there. So, I mean, that's why I was interested. We're in a food desert, and I don't think this ordinance solves that, because there's really no, unless we find somebody's got a parking lot that lets us pull it in.
I see the Aiken Standard had a editorial, I don't know whether Michael was, about booze pops. And, of course, they stated that they didn't think having frozen alcohol, margaritas, things of that nature would be a good idea, because when you buy them, yes, they start off frozen, but a few minutes later, because of the heat, they melt down, and the alcohol content can be something that we'd have to be concerned about, because they can have these drinks, get in the car, drive away. How do you feel about that?
It's a person's own responsibility as far as I'm concerned. If they aren't responsible, they can go to jail. So, there's a lot of people in town that sell this proof ice cream in their little freezers in their businesses, and I don't think it's considered alcohol, but it does have alcohol in it, so it's a, few businesses that have it. So.
Michael might disagree with that.
All right.
I would certainly have no objection as long as they're complying with alcohol laws for food trucks to serve alcohol.
I wouldn't either.
Maybe that's something we could direct staff to look at before second reading.
Yeah, I didn't think about it until this weekend, and I said, we're going to take away a right that people have right now.
Katie,
So,
the ordinance as we got it written would have allowed push carts, right? But you're saying that
But not-
SCDOT will not allow it?
apparently not. That was the excuse that the
On-
Planning Commission gave for.
And if our ordinance would allow push carts from private property,
Yeah.
It's allowed on private property, it's just not allowed on the public streets.
Ask Ryan, plan to come up with.
Yeah, I learned a lot at that meeting.
Well, it's a good thing, because we're asking you a lot of questions tonight, aren't we? Katie, thank you.
or those,
Yeah.
if you want to.
So this is about sorry, which am I addressing? I could start with the push cart.
Yeah, let's start with the push
So,
carts.
okay, the push carts, a lot of this stems from, there is a SCDOT manual rule that says commercial vending shall be prohibited from any SCDOT street, right-of-way, or sidewalk.
Right.
And so we didn't want to create a ordinance to the contrary of that. So that's where that stemmed from.
But
That's
that
kind of what
exi-
we're
that
working
exists-
around.
That exists currently, though.
That exists currently, correct. So we were, striving not
But
to.
it doesn't affect, for an example, the next item, if it was a closed plaza.
Correct,
So
right.
The alley, is, which is the
Right,
next item on our
so,
agenda.
something under city control already, parks, Newberry, those sorts of locations could either be identified by policy or by some other manner, by the designation, on the planning commission hearing, city council approval of specific locations. There could be a couple avenues to opening up some of those locations for that sort of activity. We kind of found out late in the game about the SCDOT interpretation specific to this, and so that's why there were no specific locations like that. To keep it moving along, we included a process by which you could select those types of locations, so the ordinance can continue to move forward.
Are we aware of any other jurisdictions in the state, you or the ladies that help do a lot of research, any other jurisdictions in the state that allow push carts, and whether or not they've dealt with the public rights of way?
So typically, push carts kind of, similar to our ordinance, get grouped under food vendors. So, trailers, push carts, they'll kind of get, grouped together. There are certain cities that, I only found 2 that allow the vending on the right-of-way in general. One is Charleston, and it's because they operate the streets and they actually put out to bid franchise locations, I think 14 of them, might be 17 of them, every spring. So highest bidder gets the location. And then Charleston, it was Spartanburg that designated, I think, 6 spots in their downtown area, and I believe they did so by encroachment permit. So they designated an on-street location and then went ahead and filed through the SCDOT encroachment
That's
permit
interesting.
process.
What if, we had that Hops and Hog event that ADDA sponsored a couple of weeks ago, and we had all sorts of things in the public rights of way. How do you deal with it? Do you get the street temporarily closed, or how do you deal with that?
Right, I think it comes along with the street closure permit, that the encroachment permit along with that, that's issued through public safety, addresses that concern. So that's why it's written in there that it's allowed as part of a special event.
It takes care of Aiken, Macon, then.
Correct. It also takes care of Aiken and Macon. Yeah. So those sorts of, sorts of activities were kept in mind, that those are still permitted as we currently permit them today. And it's my understanding that that's how those, again, usually along with we count a street closure as a special event.
Yeah.
And
I just don't want to sort of codify some special privilege for the city that we wouldn't equally offer our residents, business owners,
Correct.
entrepreneurs, all of that.
Ryan, was there any consideration given to designated areas being, or a certain area designated for food trucks in the future?
So we did analysis, basically, public portions of public rights of way. The original version of the ordinance that staff drafted up included provisions for locations on public rights of way and how that would work. So analysis was conducted on appropriate locations where the sidewalk's oriented in such a way, the food truck would be oriented in such a way to address a sidewalk and those sorts of things. However, like I said, kind of due to the late reaction that we received from SCDOT regarding their interpretation of their manual, we again kind of fell back to a point where we provided a process but didn't move forward at this time with specific locations, but we did start to do some of that analysis.
But we could revisit that if ever.
Correct. Yeah, that would be my next step.
I'm sorry. How difficult is it to get those street closures or encroachment permits for special events? Is that something that has to be requested and sponsored by the city, and does it take a long time, or can?
It goes through public safety, I
It
believe.
goes through public safety.
But it has to be facilitated by the city.
Correct.
And is it difficult to accomplish or take a lot of time? 3 days?
I would defer
We can ask the chief.
to the chief on that.
I think Jane Page said 3 days.
I would say that none of the special event processes that I would consider as part of this ordinance come through the planning department currently. They're either held at, usually as a facility rental or a park rental kind of thing through parks, or through a street closure through public safety. Those are the 2 primary types of special events.
I've got another question before you give away that. Don't leave. Another question before we give away the podium. I really like ice cream, and I really would love to have ice cream in the city of Aiken. I know other people that agree with me.
He does like ice cream.
Why, we just had a wonderful little meal in there and no ice cream, but why can't we have ice cream in Aiken?
So it's not disallowing ice cream. It says that you have to vend ice cream like anything else on it, that like you would anything else in the ordinance.
In a food
So
truck.
it's not like, so it's not your mobile ice cream truck. That's one of those things that, again, we weren't able to kind of work through to try to figure out how, at this point, how SCDOT would view hailing something on the side of the road as a vending process. So that's something we could check into. But if you notice, it said, I mean, there's no blanket prohibition on ice cream from a food truck. It would just have to be located.
I'm thinking
and
about like
operated.
an ice cream truck.
Right, if you're thinking about like an ice cream truck, that somebody would.
Playing the music.
The old ordinance did
There is one
specifically
that rides
say
in my
ice cream
neighborhood.
truck.
Right, and I think the ice, in that case, like ice cream was
It's been done.
mostly dressed as a, is it a food or a drink? Whether it's something kind of in between. I think it's one of the reasons it gets addressed specifically, because it wasn't sure how to be categorized as an item vended.
Maybe that's something by second reading we can figure
Yeah.
out.
We can continue to follow up on that to see what possibilities.
Well, wait, whoa. There's one thing to say you'll have ice cream. It's another thing to say that you're going to have an ice cream running through the neighborhood, ringing the bells and causing every...
We've had this for
Well, you may
years.
have it, but, you know,
It's against the law right now.
That's in your neighborhood.
It's a city ordinance right now that prohibits it.
yes, I know that.
But, and I'm thinking that we ought to revisit and rethink that.
For
And I think
district,
there should be a process for permitting and business licenses and all that kind of fun stuff, but,
Yeah.
and we'll make the motion for District 6 wants the ice cream trucks.
well, I'm saying
Said that was
citywide.
over to yours.
But
One
I
or two.
thought,
What's ice cream?
Mr.
We'll,
Ryan,
we'll continue to research that one for
But
now.
I do think we should get a consensus on the alcohol. I certainly would have no problems with a second reading. I mean, you can ask the rest of council if there's anybody has any concerns. I mean, now's the time to either approve or disapprove it before we come back for second reading.
So just to address that, the reason that was in there is from folks that I had talked to about who've had experiences with it, is that while the food vendors are considered mobile, often the customers are equally mobile. And they might, again, there's not like a sit-down facility typically for them. A lot of times they're grab and go. So there's kind of some kind of concern there.
Right.
That's where that is. So a lot of places just
Well,
prohibit it to kind of clean up that issue, but that's.
I would offer, for sake of information, that in order now in South Carolina, effective July 1st, in order to have an alcohol license and to be able to get a business license, you have to provide proof, if you're going to sell alcohol, you have to provide proof of having liquor liability coverage. And so any of these vendors, mobile vendors that might want to sell alcohol, would be required to have that and would need to provide proof to the city in order to get the city business license. And that's under state law that they have to provide that to the city. So if you do, and I agree with you on this, Dick, but if you do allow mobile vendors to sell alcohol, they will have to be providing to the city proof that they have liquor liability, and in that process of getting that coverage, they have to document that they've got proper training and how to determine who is overserved, who can get alcohol, all that kind of stuff. And so that creates a depth of underwriting to that process.
And I was thinking more of beer and wine, certainly not.
I'm talking about all, I'm not talking about liquor, I'm talking about any kind of alcohol
Yeah,
that's
no, I understand what you're
intoxicating.
saying,
But they
and that may
can-
be the killer.
But they can already do that in an event, for example. I mean, that's already in place, so.
Let me just
Ice
make a
cream
comment
truck? Oh.
for clarification. I made a little jokingly comment about the ice cream truck, but Gail commented as well. We have had an ice cream truck for years. Since I was a little girl, the ice cream truck came around for the summer. We'd hear the bell, we'd run out to get our ice cream, and on our way so long that it's probably grandfathered in by now. It's been that long. Because you have a population of people, families are working, They have nowhere to get to the store, many of them. So they run out when that ice cream truck comes down with this bill, run out to get the ice cream, and they're back with their friends playing again. So
grew up with
legally,
it,
that's the way it's happened in my community.
But the question is, does SCDOT allow ice cream trucks? Isn't that the issue? There's only 85 miles of city roads.
Correct. So that's the question, and we can follow up on that to get that answer as to
second
whether there
reading.
would be a permissible way that you could operate that from right of way, whether it's because, like I said, it's because it's on demand that you would hail it. The other thing I would bring up is that it is different to treat ice cream differently than any other prepackaged food. So that might open up the possibility to vend other prepackaged food from right of way, as you know, as most zoning ordinances, it's about treating everybody equally.
Do you have that clarification by the next meeting, possibly?
We can look into it.
All right, thank you. I'd have two people in the wings, and then I have the chief. Chief, let me ask you this real quick. What's that process look like to, when it goes before you, I guess, for the closure and then
For a street closure permit, it's very simple.
encroachment?
An encroachment permit is actually designated by ordinance for cafes downtown using the sidewalk, and there's a renewal every year of that. In June, there's a renewal every year. The street closure permit is very simple. They design and draw out what they'd like to close in the street, and we ask for 2 weeks' notice, but we do a lot to get it turned back around in less than 24 hours too.
Thank you, sir.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor? That's interesting. I learned something. One of the comments that Ms. Lipscomb made was that she's in a food desert down where her business is. And so are you saying that through the use of some type of encroachment permit, for a specific day or time or what have you, or weekend or whatnot, that there could be a possibility of a food truck down near on the east end of Park, down near her place?
I don't know. I would defer if the city allowed it on city right of way or on the right of way. Then yes.
The Park Avenue or one of the connecting streets between the east and westbound lanes of Park Avenue,
or
The Giles Park.
or the park.
close to Giles Park. Yeah. Well, we don't own Giles Park either, but that's what I'm getting at is something, because there's no other restaurants for all intents and purposes down there on that end, and Giles Park would be a dynamite place for it, and or parked in front of her place almost.
The encroachment permit is mostly for tables and chairs that those cafes use in front of their business. I would think they just would need a street closure permit so we could supply them the space to do that.
Do we need an executive
But
session
there's some
for ice cream?
possibility to accommodate that.
Do we need an executive session for ice cream?
If we get to eat ice cream.
If you look at the, I think the planning commission's video, didn't it? But there was a man there that was fabulous, that has an ice cream truck.
Ice cream
And
man.
he operates in North Augusta and everywhere else, but he said when he comes to Aiken and he's just driving through town, he feels cruel. Because there's kids that want him to stop and he can't stop. But he gave a lot of good arguments. And at the planning commission meeting, we said, well, can we take it to public safety and see if we can't figure out how to make ice cream trucks
Sure.
work. So I talked to him afterwards, and I was hoping he was here tonight, but
Very good.
Katie, you think the vendors would agree to bringing us samples for us to decide which trucks we want?
I tell you what, Little Howie's was at this event the other night, and they had fried squash. Oh my gosh, it was good.
Wow.
Follow up, on the section B, item 4, the alcohol sales from a mobile food vendor prohibited, if you add unless special event permit has been issued, I think that covers AYP, Hops and Hogs, the event that Katie was talking about, because like Chief said, when you get the special event permit or a street closure, I believe street closure would include parking spaces, Chief? So that's how that would
does,
tie in.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Ryan, you'll note that. Thank you, Jane Page. All right, any other comments from the audience? Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
Barbara Stafford, Colleton Avenue. It's in the city. I just want to say I would be so excited to have food trucks. I walk downtown a lot, and I usually walk with my dog, and it would be so great to be able to go and get something to eat and just go sit on a park bench or something and just enjoy. You know, because sometimes I go down there and I'm like starved, and I can't, go get anything. So I have to. Anyway, I'm
Yes,
just
ma'am.
like so in favor of it. Forget about the alcohol part. I just really want the food. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
BYOB.
Any other comments? Hey, good evening.
Good evening. Elizabeth Cahill, 111 Ashwood Drive. I am a city resident. I am also the chair of Aiken Young Professionals and want to thank you guys for the council and city manager and staff for bringing this forward. It is an effort that AYP has been championing as well. Jane Page and Katie have done a lot of the work, and we're just trying to support that as well. But anything that we can do to provide more transparency so that people know what the rules are and how we can legally do these things in Aiken is important. I think our special events permits, we're going through that process right now, and that seems to be quite clear. So anything that we can do to provide lower barrier of entry for businesses, especially millennials and young professionals that desire to do a business in Aiken, I think is a wonderful thing. So I just wanted to thank you all for that, and hope that we can work on this in the future to make it even better. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate your comments. Any other comments from the audience? I see Mr. Price. I know he wants to say something.
He's on the edge of his seat.
Ice cream.
You better say he likes ice cream.
All right. All right. While you're thinking about it, Dexter, I'm going to let Sam come up.
Hi, I'm Sam Erb. I live on Dibble Road here in Aiken. As some of you well know, I went to Pittsburgh and for the Main Street program. And at a few of the classes that I went to, I actually asked that question about how does food trucks and brick and mortar, what do you think about that? And I heard, bring it on. It adds excitement to your town. And this is what we're trying to do. I think also, not all food trucks are, I think you're muddying up the water bringing alcohol into it. Food trucks want to sell food. I think that's going to be a separate issue. But I urge you to support food trucks.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, any other comments from the audience? All right, comments from council? I think we've had a pretty good exchange already. I will say, and I want to kind of piggyback on what Elizabeth said, food trucks really do serve as an incubator for people who are entrepreneurs and they want to get into the food and beverage business. And so I think it is a great way for a person with little investment can start and grow into a brick and mortar, and you see that a lot of times. So it is something I think will bring some excitement, as said, and also a good opportunity for entrepreneurs to enter into a new business.
Provide a little quick anecdote.
Yeah.
Thank you for the privilege, Mr. Mayor. I've sort of, I guess, made friends with a fellow that he and his wife own a food truck in North Carolina. He's a retired North Carolina state trooper. And now his wife is a professionally trained chef from France. And they have this food truck. And having been a North Carolina state trooper, I said, well, this is like vacation to you. And he said, no, I've never worked harder in my life. He said, but it's been the best thing. People follow me. They post where they're going to be on their website. People follow him all over. And so if he is going to be doing an event in downtown in Hendersonville or Asheville or something like that, there are people that will come to that place to go to his truck. No, they're fantastic. The food is awesome. But it's amazing the excitement, to use Mr. Erb's word, the excitement and the following that they can create. But he did say it's a lot easier to be a highway patrolman than it is to be on a food truck.
All right, all those in favor on first reading, food truck ordinance? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Number 3 under new business. This is a first reading of an ordinance to close a portion of the alley and B lane to vehicular traffic. And, let's see. I don't have it pulled up here. All right, is there a motion?
I so move.
Okay, we have a motion. Diggs, is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Mary, comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, in 2016, renovation of the alley was completed with improvements to the water, sewer, and storm drain lines, as well as new paver bricks, lighting, landscaping, plantings, rocking chairs, and the like. During the time of construction, the alley was closed to vehicular traffic, and some of the businesses and citizens had asked why the alley not continue to be closed to vehicular traffic, with the alley and a portion of B Lane being used as a pedestrian plaza for special events. Several events have been held in the alley since the renovations have been completed. In order to close the alley and a portion of B Lane to vehicle traffic, a legal process had to be followed. Our staff has been successful in getting all of the property owners in the alley and the section of B Lane that we're discussing here tonight to sign an agreement for the street closing. With the agreements from the 10 property owners in the alley and B Lane, we can now proceed with officially closing a portion of the rights-of-way of the alley and B Lane to vehicular traffic. For City Council consideration is first reading of an ordinance authorizing the city to close a portion of the rights-of-ways of the alley and B Lane to vehicular traffic.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. Is there any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
I just have one question related. Walking there the other day, we got the blue markings all over the place, which I think designate water. I hope we're not doing any construction there, are we?
No, not on the alley.
Why are the blue lines there?
I'd have to go out and check, but we're not. I think there are connections there, but there is no plans to dig up the alley.
There's all sorts of color that when you have it marked, the underground
Well,
marking,
yeah, I know, but when they put the colors down, it usually means something's happening.
It's locating existing lines.
Yes.
They're locating the existing lines.
probably all in preparation for the infrastructure work over here.
That is exactly what's happening.
When they'll locate all of them in the block.
All right, thank you.
What is a compensation agreement?
Say-
What is a compensation agreement as, on the second paragraph?
We'll ask our council on that.
Under South Carolina law, a city is allowed to close a right-of-way or alter how the right-of-way operates. In this case, you're not closing the right-of-way to everybody, you're just closing the right-of-way to vehicular traffic. And you're still allowing the pedestrian mall to exist, so people can walk down the alley, but they can't drive down the alley. In South Carolina law says that when city council decides to modify that right-of-way, before you can do that, you have to compensate the property owners along that right-of-way. In this particular case, every property owner along the right-of-way of the alley and B Lane has signed an agreement where they're waiving any entitlement to compensation. So the city's not paying anybody anything, and that's thanks to the graciousness of those people who own that property along the alley.
Well, we do want to say a thank you to our property owners who did that, and I'd like to recognize also John Michaels. Is John still here? John? Yeah, John, I wanted to thank you. I know you worked hard in working with those property owners to get the signatures that were necessary. Appreciate your efforts on that. And congratulations to you. We're talking about Rotary. We'll make a Rotary night of it. John was inducted as the new president of the Aiken Rotary Club tonight. So, John, congratulations. All right, hear no comment. All those in favor on first reading? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to number 4. This is first reading of an ordinance to amend the lease agreement with the Sala America Energy for lease of properties in Vereen's Industrial Park by title, an ordinance approving the amendment of the lease of property at Vereen's Industrial Park to Solar America Energy, LLC. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Ramoki. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, at the City Council meeting on April 24th, Council approved a lease of 35 acres in the Marines Industrial Park to Sol America Energy LLC. This 35 acres is a portion of the parcel which contains about 147 acres. At the time, Sol America was just interested in leasing a portion of the parcel. They have come back to us and want to lease the entire 147-acre parcel, except portions of the property used by the city. They have asked that the lease approved on April 24th be amended as shown in Exhibit A of the attached ordinance. Staff and the city attorney have reviewed the proposed amendment and recommend its approval. For City Council consideration is first reading of an ordinance to amend the lease with Sol America Energy LLC for lease of 35 acres in the Marines Industrial Park to instead lease the entire 147-acre parcel. And I want to recognize our Assistant City Manager and Airport Manager, Stuart Biedenbow, who has really worked hard on this issue.
Thank you, Stuart, for your hard work on that. Any comments from the audience? Comments from council?
Question, Mr. Mayor. I passed a facility like this over the weekend, and one thing I noticed is it had been a wooded area that had been clear-cut and scraped, and then the solar arrays and all that were put in. And what it looked to me like was that it had created a rather significant erosion problem, having taken all the trees and everything off and essentially scraping down to the dirt. And it was a concern for me, to wondering whether there was a provision or a requirement or expectation that they stabilize the soil and prevent any kind of stormwater runoff or erosion or any problems like that.
Sure. I'll ask our Assistant City Manager, Stuart Biedenbow, to come and address that question.
One thing, you are correct. Wherever they put any solar panels, they will have to clear the property. They will not be using the entire property for solar because some of it is classified as a wetlands. So, but I can confirm that, and the gentleman who was here when we had the initial lease is not here tonight. He will be here for second reading on July 10th, but I will follow up with him, and I know they will put something in place to mitigate or minimize any erosion. But
do they have to get a DHEC
yes,
land disturbance permit?
They will have to go through all of that in addition to filing due the proximity with the airport to the airport with the FAA. So they've got to. That's part of this process. That's why they have the option on the property, so they can complete their due diligence and get that done.
Because DHEC will dictate all those matters of through their stormwater best practices stuff. Will dictate how they manage all that. It's just the place I saw, which was also in South Carolina. Maybe the DHEC hadn't visited recently, but it was a lot of red clay that was badly washing down a hill into the kind of out towards into a ditch right before the road. And I didn't want to see that happen under our lease.
That's right, and as you're familiar with this property, it does have some topographical issues, and that's why it's been undeveloped since I guess it was an industrial park. But yeah, they're aware of that. Just in general, I haven't talked to them in detail about the plans, but I know they are aware they have to go to DHEC for some of those issues to minimize the erosion.
Mr. Mayor, Stuart, I have several questions. One was, you answered one regarding the solar panels, whether those panels would go on the entire 147 acres. Secondly, they currently have 35 acres paying
500. It's 500 an acre, and they will lease up to 147. They will ultimately not lease the entire property, as the memo states. We do use a little bit of that property. I think we've got a lift station there, so some of it that the city's not using, and ultimately I don't believe they will lease the area that's classified as a wetlands. But basically, it's just clean to give them an option right now on the entire property versus delineating where the wetlands are, because no one's going to come in and want to lease the wetlands for some sort of development.
So what are
from
they
us.
paying us per acre per year?
$500 an acre, which is the same that they're paying us. That was, that amount did not change in the lease approved April the 24th.
$500 per acre?
Per acre, yes.
Per-
Yes. No, $500 per acre per year is what they will be paying. Basically, they're continuing that dollar amount, which we did have analysis done at council's request back in March of this year, and it was considered a fair market value per acre lease for that property in that location.
All right. Thank you, Stuart.
I'm not.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I haven't
Councilwoman
concluded
Price.
yet. I'd like to know at the next meeting what they plan to do in terms of further development, if any at all, for the second reading.
Oh, you're talking about in terms of the location of the solar panels and
Yes.
so forth? Okay. Yeah, they can speak to that, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Any other questions or comments from council? None. All those in favor on first reading? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving down to petitions and requests. Number one is an approval of a resolution authorizing water service to a lot on Whiskey Road at Chucker Creek Road. Let's see. By title. A resolution authorizing the provision of water and sanitary sewer utility services to property located at the southwestern corner of the intersection of Whiskey Road and Chucker Creek Road. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Councilman Ebner. Thank you, Councilman Dewar, for second. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, a request has been received from Mr. Dennis Trotter of Jordan Trotter Commercial Real Estate and the owner, Farrell L. Hawley Jr., for city water service for a future Dollar General store to be located on Whiskey Road at Chucker Creek Road. The parcel is currently undeveloped. The city utility policy requires that development of a site in an unincorporated area receiving city services must be approved by the city council after planning commission review. City water service is available to the site, but not sanitary sewer at this time. The Planning Commission considered the request at their June 13th meeting and voted unanimously to recommend approval with the conditions as outlined in the agenda. For City Council consideration is approval of a resolution authorizing the city to provide water service to property located on Whiskey Road at Chucker Creek Road. And Mr. Mayor, I noticed that Mr. Trotter is present this evening to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Clem. All right.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Mr. Mary has left the room. This property is owned by a family member, and so he's recusing himself from these discussions.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr.
Good evening, council members, Mr. Mayor. The property, as y'all are aware, is in Aiken County and not contiguous, so the city's adopted this procedure for these exact scenarios for providing utility service to property that's not in the city nor contiguous to the city. So we have set up the development to comply with the city's ordinances for tree management, traffic management, landscaping, building setbacks, signage, architecture, and as prescribed in the policies for utility service to unincorporated areas in the county, and work with staff to develop the conditions to the recommendation that the Planning Commission put forth that are acceptable to us. And unfortunately, sewer is not available to the property yet. Hopefully in the future it will be, and when it is, we will make arrangements for the development to be connected to that sewer at that time and abandon the on-site sewer management system. So appreciate your consideration of this, and I believe it's all been designed to be in total compliance with your existing policies and regulations for these situations. So happy to answer any questions y'all may have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Trotter?
Yes. I've just, it's New Ellington water to that place, and I assume the little down where the Mexican food place, that's all New Ellington water?
Yes, sir.
Is that the city running that water line? There's a blue pipe being installed.
Well, I think there's a water line on each side of Whiskey Road, and on our side, on the western right-of-way of Whiskey is a city water line that
Okay.
we'll be utilizing, and on the eastern side must be the New Ellington water line.
Well, then the city line butts up against it. There's a history behind that, which
And
you probably know better than I do.
I think all the, fire service, water service, all sort of converges right around that intersection, a point of New Ellington and city and county all sort of.
Now, there's
come together there.
a sewer line on the other side of the road. Is that a requirement okay to go ahead and put a drain field in here? And I'm not, you may know, or I'll have the city check. There's a sewer line on the other side of the road that serves all the way down to Lagatha. And I don't know where the sewer is for the Mexican food and those. Are those crossing?
Sir, we looked at both of those and we're unable to get to them because we need several easements from private landowners to get to those that aren't available right now. And they don't meet, there's a distance requirement. It has to be within or inside of, I believe, 1,200 linear feet, which we can't meet that either. So for that reason, we decided we can't get to it actually, but if it becomes available in the future, we have basically an intercept pipe coming out of the development.
Okay.
That'll allow for a future connection.
All right. Thank you for the information.
Very good. Thank you.
I have a question. What surrounds this property right now?
It is vacant land.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. This is an existing tract on the corner, and it's surrounded by 28 acres of vacant property.
So you only taken, I thought I saw noted about 31 acres of land total. And you're taking a portion, what portion of this are you taking out?
About 1.3.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So that's across the street from the country inn?
Yes, ma'am.
Good location?
We hope so.
All right, any other questions? All those in favor? And that's unanimous, with it noted that Councilman Mary has recused himself and left the room. Thank you. All right. Coming back in? Moving down petitions and requests. Number 2, this is a resolution to accept the deed of dedication for the Hillsborough Detention Pond. Is there a motion?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Duar. Is there a second? Thank you, Councilman Moki. Comments from staff?
Mr. Mayor, Harlem LLC and the Hillsborough Townhomes Homeowners Association have requested the city to accept a deed of dedication for the Hillsborough Detention Pond and the related equipment. This pond is located off Spencer Drive behind the Aiken Mall. The engineering staff has inspected the detention pond and has recommended that the city accept the deed of dedication. Staff has been working with the owners for some time to get this detention pond dedicated to the city. For city council consideration is a resolution to accept the Hillsborough Detention Pond.
Thank you. Mr. Clem, any comments from our audience? Okay.
Is there still a significant drainage?
I'd have to check.
I sure hope not.
Just asking the question, so.
Do we have anyone here who can?
Michelle can might be with this.
Good evening, Michelle.
Question was,
Drainage, is there any significant drainage problems that we need to be concerned about?
no, our engineering staff has confirmed that the detention pond and the adjoining, there's a stormwater drainage pipe that as an outlet point for that location, and we have no concerns. This has been an ongoing request, and we've finally gotten to the point where hopefully it can be approved tonight.
All right. Councilman Ebner?
And maybe I need this answer not only for this one, but in the past, the city has had POAs take over, Property Owners Association take over detention ponds, and I wondered why the city is accepting this one and that company doesn't keep it. It's a mixture around the city. Some places the city owns the first one and the second one the property owners has it, and sometimes it's reversed. It's a mixture around the city, and I guess what I'd like to know if you could find out, what is the policy of DHEC on maintenance and operation and dedication of detention retention ponds? Because it's a mixture around the city, and since I've been on council, some of them get dedicated and some of them don't.
We'll find out.
Yes, sir.
I have a suspicion in the past why they didn't, because it's a cost problem and pawn it off on
Right.
somebody else. But I think there's some legal issues involved with a service pond. If you'd let us know to the council, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
Reggie, would you feel more comfortable if we,
Oh, no, I'm okay with it, but in the past, the propensity has been to pass it off to the Property Owners Association, and where there's a business, we take it over. And I just want to know if there's a distinction between a business and a homeowner's. There is some cost to maintaining these.
Michelle, let me ask you, is there anything pressing in us doing this tonight?
Not to my knowledge. It's just been, I just know it's been on the books.
Right.
We've
I
been working
understand.
to get to this
Well, this is the
point.
proper way to do it, because there's some liability issues involved with the maintenance of these ponds. So I have no problem passing it tonight. I just want an answer on the others that have been not done this way. So
Fair
this, I'm okay with this.
Fair enough.
Well, Dick has one in his district, House Lake. What is that?
The what?
I'm speaking, Dick, in terms of the pond in your district. The drainage.
We have three of them, as far as I know, they're owned by the golf course.
They've been wanting us to take one of those over, but anyway.
Well, that's why I would like to get a DHEC ruling, because we had about 10 years ago, we had the ruling where the city was trying to get the property owners to run the sewer lines, and they're not, they don't have a permit to do that. So I think to get a DHEC ruling would be appropriate.
I think some in the past, I think some of them have just simply been that nobody presented them to the city for dedication.
Yeah, that's
It's been part of the deal, but I think there's been another part of the deal where perhaps some homeowners associations wanted to keep the ponds as an amenity if they were, more pleasing to the eye, that sort of thing, where, like almost like a park for the neighborhood. They may not have been as interested in conveying those ponds to the city for
Well,
whatever reason.
For going back almost 20 years ago, the city was saying that the neighborhoods operated sewer and water and stormwater, and that's been against the not only the federal regulations for decades beyond that, and we had to go back and accept miles and miles of sewers all over the city. And I'd just like to get a ruling on this, if there is some liability if these things like the dam washes out or whatever.
Yeah.
But
I'd really like to have that before we voted on this tonight. I don't know if anyone else.
I think this is the right way to go, is for
Yeah.
the city to own them.
You're wondering if there's a liability, the city has a liability for a detention pond or dam that has not yet been dedicated to the city?
No, there's a liability for that amount of water if the dam washes out. If you go over there off of University.
Yeah, you're talking about for ones that have been dedicated to the city? Well, yeah, there absolutely is a liability for that.
And the neighborhood has the liability for it if it's not dedicated to the
Councilman
city.
Hamilton.
Is the detention or retention pond a tax parcel? And if it belongs to
Yes.
the POA, are they responsible for the tax? And
Yes.
it's basically, if they give it to the city, like vanishes, right?
And they're responsible for maintenance and the upkeep
Yeah,
and the
that too, yeah.
inspections. I'm okay with passing this. I don't think we should hold this up. To me, this is the right way to do it.
Well, I don't think there's a rush to do it tonight, though, and I would really like to hear the answer to the question before we vote on it. So
Okay.
if anybody would be willing to make a motion to,
I'll withdraw my motion.
Can I make sure I understand the question?
Yes, who is supposed to operate and own detention and retention ponds in the state of South Carolina?
Okay.
And if you go back in 2007, we had this same discussion about who operates sewer, potable water, and stormwater. And at the time, I forgot to ask about detention, retention ponds.
Okay. I mean, golf courses have privately owned detention ponds all over the place. They call them water
Yeah.
features.
Well, that's an issue. There's an issue with that because they call them a lake, which 6 acres and larger becomes under the Corps of Engineers. And the Corps doesn't care what's in the lake.
Right.
But if the dam washes out, the homeowners are responsible for the downstream damage.
Absolutely.
So
And you get
we'll-
insurance for that.
if we could clarify and let staff get back to us, I'd
I
appreciate
think
it.
Hounds Lake wanted to keep theirs for the amenity portion, although there are some neighbors that did want to get rid of one, but it's clearly under the purview of the golf course.
But they ask us to maintain it, sometimes clean it.
But yes, well, for all three of them with Sledge, yeah, with Sledge, yes, yeah.
Yep.
Is there a motion to continue this to our next meeting?
I so move.
Give a second.
I second.
Thank you. Discussion. All those in favor? No?
Vote on it. I know the answer.
Okay.
I'd vote on it, but
Okay. So it passes not unanimously, but majority. All those opposed? All right, Councilman Mary. Very good. Motion passes. All right. Moving down to items of information, issues, and updates, I'll recognize Councilman DeWar.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I had originally sent a request to the city manager asking the council vote on placing the Renaissance on the ballot, either the primary ballot or the general ballot. I asked for that with the hospitality tax. I'm not a fan of doing that, but given the fact that we're going to have an election anyway, I don't see any harm in it. However, there's some facts that I was not aware of, and Stuart helped me out if I misunderstood your memo. My understanding is we have no control over the primaries. We can request that the parties put the item on their ballot, on their primary ballots, because they run the primaries. And if we wanted to put it on the general election, I think we could request that be done. It's really almost premature to raise the question the more I think about it, because we don't know how many candidates we're going to have. We don't know how many primaries. We're still being run by the old law that if a candidate has no opponent, there's no primary. And I'm hearing lots of rumors about candidates, so I think we're probably going to have some primaries, but again, only in those particular districts. So if we were to do it, I guess the best time to do it would be in November, and I'm not sure that that's not too late to make any kind of impact. I don't know where we'll be with the Renaissance by November, but I think we'll be further down the road, to the point that putting it on the ballot in November would be a waste of time. But maybe the city manager can help with what he thinks the progress of the Renaissance will be between now and November. Did I quote you correctly, Stuart?
Yes.
Oh, good. I do know how to read once in a while.
man of many words, Stuart Biedenbach.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Councilman DeWar.
Thanks.
Anything else for issues and updates?
Wait.
James Thompson, 240 Knox Avenue, Aiken County's Executive Committee woman to the State Republican Party.
Is there public comment on?
Can I just
You
give you
can,
an
yeah,
idea?
you can. I just want to make sure.
We had this issue come up in North Augusta when they wanted to put a ballot referendum on a primary. The suggestion we got from the State Elections Commission was to not put it on the primary ballot, but when there was an at-large seat up to be elected, then it could go then. because there is a chairman's race for Aiken County, and all of Aiken County would have to vote in that, you can request that your districts have that referendum put on that ballot. That issue.
But are there not split precincts? I mean, I think there are.
Not for county council chairman of county council.
Yeah, but the city lines
Your
would
city-
split the precincts. I mean,
Yeah, your precincts
there's some
would come
precincts that
out.
are in and out of the, there are certain precincts that have both county and city. I mean, you know.
So the county of Aiken,
Right.
everybody in the county of Aiken gets to vote. That includes everybody in the city limits.
Right.
So the city limit ballot for chairman could include a ballot referendum question about the Renaissance, should that be the route you want to proceed with.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.
But the precincts aren't split, as the city has its own precincts.
Yeah, they are split because of I mean, they are. Not everything, the precinct isn't the basic building block of the city lines. In other words, you may have Millbrook 20, which has some county pockets in it.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Oh, the
And so-
donut holes, yes.
So,
Concur.
so that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But-
Yep, you're right.
all right. Thank you, Jane Page. All right, any other comments under issues and updates?
I'd simply reiterate again, we had the great report on the railroad stormwater repair coming in on time and under budget. I just want to again give kudos publicly to our engineering folks and all the people involved. I'd mentioned George Grinton as well. I just want to say thanks to everybody who did a good job.
I'd like to just say thank you to whoever thought of putting the slats on the York Street Bridge long ways instead of across. If you've ridden across it, you're not chattering your teeth out anymore. So well thought out. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? We have a motion, a second? All those in favor, please stand up. We're adjourned.